By the time many cancers cause obvious symptoms, they may have been growing quietly for years. That is the part most people never hear. You notice a little fatigue, a cough that hangs on, a change in bowel habits, a lump that seems to appear out of nowhere, and it feels sudden. But cancer usually does not begin suddenly. It begins silently, one changed cell at a time, while the rest of life keeps moving like normal. That is why so many people miss the early phase. Nothing feels dramatic, nothing screams emergency, and if you have ever brushed off a strange symptom because you were busy, stressed, or just hoping it would pass, this matters to you more than you think. Cancer is not one disease, and every type behaves differently, but many follow the same basic pattern: damage, growth, escape, and then symptoms much later than most people expect. Stay with me until we get to the moment a silent cluster of cells builds its own blood supply, because that turning point explains why a tumor can stay hidden for so long and then suddenly start causing problems. I'm Dr. Steve Collins, and if you want clear, credible health videos without the scare tactics, subscribe now. The more you understand how the body changes, the harder it becomes to ignore the signals that truly matter. Over the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through how cancer actually develops inside the body, why it can remain unnoticed for such a long time, and why symptoms often appear only after normal tissue has already been disrupted, step by step, so the process makes sense instead of sounding like a medical textbook. And remember that point about a tumor building its own blood supply, because when you understand that one shift, a lot of the mystery around late symptoms starts to disappear. Reason one cell stops following the rules. Your body is built from trillions of cells, and most of them live by strict instructions. They grow when needed, repair damage when possible, and die when their job is done. Cancer begins when one cell picks up changes in its DNA, the chemical code that tells the cell how to behave, and those changes start breaking the normal rules. Sometimes the damage comes from tobacco smoke, radiation, certain infections, or repeated inflammation. Sometimes it comes from random copying mistakes that happen as cells divide. Usually, it is not one single hit. It is a series of changes that slowly stack up. At first, this does not feel like anything in real life. There is no pain, no dramatic warning. The cell is microscopic. You cannot see it and you cannot feel it. That is exactly why this stage is so easy to miss. Most people imagine cancer beginning like a switch flipping on overnight, but biology is usually much slower than that. And here is what surprises most people. The body can tolerate a small number of abnormal cells for quite a while before they create visible trouble. If those early changes keep accumulating and nothing stops the process, that cell can become the ancestor of thousands, then millions of cells that keep multiplying when they should not. Think about the last time you had a symptom and told yourself it was probably nothing. That instinct is human, but it also explains why the early story of cancer is almost always quiet enough to be ignored. Reason two, the abnormal cells learn how to survive. Even after a cell starts acting abnormally, that does not guarantee cancer will take hold. The body has quality control systems. Cells with major damage are supposed to repair themselves or self-destruct in a process called apoptosis, which simply means programmed cell death. The immune system also patrols for suspicious cells and can remove some of them before they become a larger problem. But cancer becomes dangerous when damaged cells stop obeying those shutdown signals. They find ways to keep dividing, even when the body is trying to hit the brakes. They may ignore messages to stop growing, they may avoid self-destruction, they may even create a neighborhood around themselves that helps them survive. In everyday life, this stage still rarely feels dramatic. A person might feel perfectly healthy, while a tiny population of abnormal cells is already learning how to persist. That is one reason people misattribute later symptoms to aging, stress, or minor illness. The real process started long before the body gave any clue. What I'm about to tell you about the next step changes everything, because surviving is not enough. For a tumor to matter, it has to expand. Picture a weed pushing through a sidewalk crack. At first, it is tiny, easy to miss. Then one day you notice it everywhere and wonder how it got that far. Cancer growth can feel just as sudden, even when the groundwork was laid long before. Reason three, the cluster grows but stays silent. As those abnormal cells multiply, they can form a small mass, often called a tumor. A tumor is simply a growth of abnormal cells. Not every tumor is cancerous, and not every cancer forms a solid lump, but the principle is similar. Cells are expanding beyond normal control. Early on, many tumors remain silent because they are still too small to interfere with the work of the organ around them. A small growth in the colon may not block the passage of stool. A small growth in the lung may not affect breathing. A small growth in the liver may not disturb enough tissue to change how the body feels. That silence creates a dangerous illusion. People assume that no symptoms means no problem, but organs often have a large reserve capacity. In plain terms, they can keep functioning reasonably well, even when something abnormal is developing inside them. That is why cancer can grow in plain sight biologically, yet remain invisible in everyday life. Stay with me here, because the body is not necessarily unaware. The immune system, nearby tissue, and chemical signals may already be changing, but those changes are often too subtle for a person to notice. Maybe there is no symptom at all. Maybe there is something vague, like mild fatigue, occasional bloating, or a change that comes and goes. Most people blame diet, sleep, stress, or a busy week. That does not make them careless. It makes them normal. But if growth continues, the tumor eventually reaches a limit. And this next part is the turning point most people completely overlook. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored a symptom because it seemed too small to matter? Drop a yes or a no in the comments. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps me make videos that answer the questions people are actually living with. Reason 4, the tumor builds its own blood supply. A growing tumor cannot keep expanding forever on the nutrients already nearby. At a certain point, it needs more oxygen and more fuel. So it begins sending chemical signals that encourage the body to grow new blood vessels into the tumor. This process is called angiogenesis. All that means is the creation of new blood vessels. This is the moment I teased earlier, and it matters because it often marks the shift from a tiny, quiet growth to something with the resources to grow faster and affect the body more deeply. Once a tumor has a stronger blood supply, it can increase in size more efficiently. It can release more waste products. It can disturb more surrounding tissue, and in some cases, it gains easier access to pathways that may later help cancer cells travel elsewhere. Let that sink in for a second. A tumor is not just sitting there passively. It can actively reshape its environment so it can keep living. In real life, this still may not cause immediate symptoms. That is another reason the disease seems to come out of nowhere later. A person can feel mostly fine while this crucial transition is happening. But here's the part that really matters. Once blood supply improves, growth can become more biologically significant, and symptoms often begin only when normal structures are squeezed, invaded, irritated, or made less effective. A tumor in the brain may start causing headaches or vision changes when pressure rises. A tumor in the bowel may cause constipation, bleeding, or narrowing when it disrupts the passageway. A tumor in the pancreas may stay silent until it affects digestion or blocks nearby ducts. The symptom is often not the first event. It is the result of many earlier events finally reaching a threshold the body can no longer compensate for. Reason 5, normal tissue gets pushed, blocked, or damaged. This is where symptoms often become noticeable, and it explains why they appear so late. Cancer symptoms usually do not happen just because abnormal cells exist. They happen when those cells interfere with normal function. Think about what an organ is supposed to do every day. The lungs move air, the colon moves waste, the liver processes nutrients and toxins, the brain coordinates everything. If a tumor grows large enough or grows in the wrong place, it starts disrupting that job. It may press on nerves and create pain. It may erode blood vessels and cause bleeding. It may block tubes, ducts, or airways. It may trigger inflammation, which is the body's built-in alarm response to injury, and that can cause swelling, fatigue, fever, or changes in appetite. But here's the real question. Why does nobody talk enough about how nonspecific many of these symptoms can be? Fatigue is common. Weight loss can be blamed on stress. Persistent indigestion gets blamed on food. A lingering cough gets blamed on a past infection or allergies. Even bleeding may be explained away by hemorrhoids, irritation, or hormonal changes, depending on the situation. That is why cancers are sometimes found later than anyone would want. The symptoms that finally appear are often real, but they are not unique enough for a person to instantly think cancer. And this next one, I want you to pay very close attention to, because it explains why symptoms can affect the whole body, even when the cancer starts in just one place. Reason 6. The body starts reacting as a whole. Cancer is local in the beginning, but over time it can influence the entire body. Tumors can release inflammatory chemicals and other signals that change metabolism, appetite, energy use, and immune activity. Metabolism is the set of processes your body uses to turn food into energy and building materials. When cancer alters that balance, a person may start losing weight without trying, feel profoundly tired, or notice weakness that does not match their daily routine. Some people experience fevers, night sweats, or a deep sense that something is off, even before a clear symptom points to one organ. Others feel almost nothing until the disease is advanced. That variation is part of what makes cancer so difficult to recognize early, from symptoms alone. Imagine someone carrying on with work, family, errands, and normal stress while a quiet biological struggle is unfolding underneath. They may just say, "I've been exhausted lately," and keep moving. They may promise themselves they will look into it after the busy season. They may decide it is age, burnout, poor sleep, or a vitamin issue. Sometimes they are right. Often, common symptoms have common explanations, but sometimes the body is signaling a deeper problem, and delay allows more time for cancer to grow unchecked. That does not mean every symptom is dangerous. It means persistent, unexplained, or worsening changes deserve attention, especially when they do not fit your usual pattern. What I am about to explain next is where cancer becomes even harder to manage, and understanding it changes how you think about the phrase, caught early. Reason 7. Some cells break away and spread. The most serious cancers do not only grow where they started. Some cancer cells gain the ability to break away, move into blood vessels or lymph vessels, and travel to other parts of the body. Lymph is a clear fluid that helps the immune system and drains through a network of vessels and nodes. When cancer spreads to distant sites, that is called metastasis. This step matters because the disease is no longer just disturbing one local area. It is establishing new colonies elsewhere, sometimes in the liver, lungs, bones, or brain, depending on the cancer type. In real life, spread may show up as new pain, fractures, headaches, shortness of breath, or extreme fatigue. But again, many of those symptoms can sound ordinary at first. That is what makes this so deceptive. Here's the pattern interrupt you need to remember. Late symptoms do not mean cancer suddenly became aggressive that week. Often, they mean the process has been unfolding quietly for much longer than anyone realized. That is also why screening can matter so much for certain cancers. Screening means checking for disease before symptoms appear, using established tests recommended for specific ages or risk groups. The whole idea is to catch abnormal changes before they grow enough to interfere with normal tissue or spread elsewhere. Symptoms are important, but they are often a late chapter in the story, not the beginning. And when people wait for something dramatic before taking a persistent change seriously, they may be waiting for the very stage that is hardest to treat. Reason 8. Why late symptoms feel sudden, even when the process was slow. By the time cancer becomes noticeable, several layers of biology have usually already happened. DNA damage accumulated, abnormal cells survived, a cluster formed, the environment around it changed, blood supply improved, normal tissue got pushed or injured, in some cases spread had already started. The reason symptoms feel sudden is that the body compensates for a long time, then reaches a threshold. Once that threshold is crossed, the difference can seem dramatic. A cough goes from occasional to constant. Bowel habits change and do not return to normal. Energy drops fast. A lump becomes easier to feel. Bleeding appears. Pain that was vague becomes persistent. To the person experiencing it, it feels like the disease appeared out of nowhere. Biologically, it has usually been developing behind the scenes. So what does this mean for you? It means the goal is not to become terrified of every ache or every tired day. It means learning the pattern. New, persistent, unexplained, worsening, different from your normal. Those are the kinds of changes that deserve medical attention, especially if they last. Most will not turn out to be cancer, but that mindset helps you respond earlier, when earlier still matters. Now we can close the loop. The reason a tumor can stay hidden for so long is not just that it starts small, it is that the body can compensate, the growth may not disturb normal function at first, and symptoms usually wait until the biology crosses a threshold. But the moment a tumor builds its own blood supply, everything can begin to accelerate. That new supply gives it oxygen, nutrients, and a foothold. In many cases, that is the shift that helps turn a quiet cluster of abnormal cells into something large enough to press, block, bleed, inflame, and finally be felt. The most important takeaway is simple. Cancer often announces itself late, not because your body failed, but because the process is designed to stay silent until normal tissue is affected. So the practical step you can take today is this. Pay attention to one change that is new for you and write down when it started. That habit makes it easier to notice patterns and talk with a doctor if something does not settle. I'm Dr. Steve Collins. If this helped you understand your body in a calmer, clearer way, stay with this channel. And watch the next video because I am going to show you which warning signs people dismiss most often.